Is America gonna help us ever? You know, because I mean, we know for a long time they haven't. Are they ever? And it's like all these things show us, you know.
Liberty and justice, better stand up for your rights. We still under repression, they just switched up the plight. They wanna silence me because I'm living really right. I won't break, I won't fold, I won't give up without a fight. I wanna cry, but I don't shed no tears. Instead I made a plan, the time is here. All that singing just opened the door. And now that we here, let's end this war.
Have you ever had to make a tough decision? A decision that could land you financially disabled? A decision that could take you out of your comfort zone? A decision that could have people talking about you in a negative light? Well, I had to make that decision, not knowing where to believe me. And over time, I see that it opened my eyes to a new reality. My exit strategy wasn't meant to be. I had plans to retire as a captain or a chief in the fire department. But after coming back to a hostile work environment, I had no choice but to create one. After releasing my first polished hip-hop project entitled Exit Strategy in 2013, my mind was set on achieving financial stability. I would achieve financial stability not from labor, but by seizing it from wisdom I've obtained over the years. My only chance at redemption would be solely based on content I created. I knew by November of 2012 that I had to produce times, dates, names, and occurrences of things that were happening to me as a DC firefighter. I created a journal and documented each situation I encountered starting October of 2012 up until my termination in October of 2014. In May of 2012, I started recording 100 songs. I wrote these songs between January 1st, 2014 and March 2014. I completed the project in July. I would then go on to shoot over 50 music videos to lay the foundation of J Scales music. I would then continue to build upon my photography business plan. I knew music alone at the time wasn't going to pay the bills. In August of 2015, I would establish Stacktown Films. I would use my photography and video production skills to maintain income while I worked on my exit strategy memoir. I would use music and visual arts to communicate the tactics used by tyrannical leaders in the workplace. The world of mass media was at my hands. All I had to do was use the tools I had invested in. I implemented this strategy in order to avoid a tragic situation. I was having bad thoughts and refused to sing common and use vulgar language or violence to solve my issues. I had to use my mind, my creativity. Some people may not have the skill sets or other job interests. Some people invest their entire life into careers and decide to act negative in the event of termination. Others simply put up with toxic work environments and take it out on family and friends. This exit strategy serves to assist in identifying challenges as they arise so that the affected has a chance to defend themselves when necessary. I was scheduled to graduate high school in 2001, but was held back because of a DC history class I hadn't taken in the 9th grade. This would turn out to be a blessing because I didn't have a set plan in place. I was working with a mentor who showed me what I could have if I focused in on education. Soon after our meeting, I would go and pray on to God and ask him, can I be paid to learn? Shortly after that, an opportunity presented itself where I could get paid to study anatomy, physiology, bioscience, and be compensated for it. Upon graduating, I was ready for the world. Witnessing the actions of the brave men and women of FDNY shaped me into who I am today. I've seen many heroic feats performed by firefighters, including fire rescue and talking people out of committing suicide. These rescues would serve as a mental note to help those in need. Years later, something greater would manifest. If you ask me what I wanted to be as a kid, I would tell you a space cadet or an entertainer. Hip-hop and astrology have always been in my life. Whether it was pulling encyclopedias off the bookshelf and diving into other galaxies, or turning on the radio and listening to the good sounds of boom bap, my destiny was pre-written. It wasn't until my coming of age that I would find my true calling. Little to my knowledge, being a cadet was in my near future. In my 11th grade year in Easton Senior High School, I had a dream I was a firefighter. It was so vivid I could smell the smoke. Later that year, a former graduate visited the school in the fire department in uniform. He explained that he was a cadet and would be graduating to the rank of firefighter EMT. I was intrigued and wanted to learn more. He gave me the telephone number and I was able to get the information that I needed. The next year, I would meet Sergeant Joe Morgan. He let me know what I needed to do in order to prepare for the cadet program. I took heed to his words and followed through on my part. On July 15, 2002, I would officially become a Washington, D.C. Fire and EMS cadet. On July 15th, 2002, I began the DCFD and EMS cadet program. I was going from high school into the big leagues. The cadet program lasted a year, and for those who completed the courses, were granted the opportunity to become a member of the DCFD and EMS department. During the program, cadets obtained our National Registry EMT, Firefighter 1 and 2, and Hazardous Material Awareness and Operations certifications. Cadets also participated in departmental rotations where we were exposed and acclimated to all aspects of the fire department. The transition from boy to a man was here. With instructions from former cadets who were now ranking members, myself and 21 other cadets started our journey to become professional firefighters and EMTs. We would start our days at 0700 hours with physical training, followed by firefighting 1 and 2 courses. We would finish our days with hands-on training and reviews. This fast-paced environment was new and exciting to me. I woke up every day motivated to learn something new. Upon completion of firefighting 1 and 2 and hazardous material awareness, we were split up and sent on rotation. During rotation, I met the men and women who keep the ship afloat. I spent time at the communications division, at the public information office, the property section, and at engine and truck companies throughout the city. I was learning how the chess pieces moved and how they complemented each other. I was able to get the bigger picture of what goes on in the city and what it takes to manage one. After rotation was over, we were formally introduced to emergency medical services. Obtaining our national registry would determine if we would qualify to be professional firefighter EMTs. I took keen interest in EMS because I know this is where I can make a difference. Seeing death at a young age and being helpless to do anything filled me with ambition. The love of learning made ingesting medical knowledge effortless. I would sit in front of the class taking notes and recording lectures. Cadet Class 9 will also become DC's first EMTAs. We were taught how to start IV lines, administer medications such as albuterol, Ventolin, and oral glucose. I completed the EMT course and obtained my CPR AED and my EMTA certifications. The day we were all waiting for had arrived. We graduated on July 15, 2003 and were given our assignments. My first season as a DC firefighter EMT was here. I was appointed to Engine Company 8, Platoon 3. My shift fell on the day I graduated, so I had 3 days to prepare. I stopped by the firehouse to meet the crew later that day. I was nervous walking into the firehouse, but made it through the door. A new journey in life was set to begin. The time to live the dream was here. Have you ever had a strange feeling of excitement? A mixture of curiosity, surprise, and awe? Coming from where I'm from, I would call and see this as a blessing. After graduating for the second time in 2 years, I was on my road to success and plowing toward greatness. The day I had been waiting for had finally arrived. My first tour of duty was a long one, to say the least. I arrived at the firehouse at 0500 hours. I relieved the layout man and went over the piece with the wagon master. While performing our daily cleanup, our first call came in. We didn't get a chance to eat. The calls kept rolling in. In total, we ran 23 calls. This included a car fire at 1 a.m. I would learn to drink plenty of water, eat oatmeal, and have trail mix and peanut butter jelly sandwiches on deck for peak hours. This was just a taste of what was to come. I would see and learn many things in the coming months. The call volume offered a wide range of fire and EMS calls that were useful in gaining experience. Every tour of duty was different. This is the pace I needed, having no prior firefighting or EMS experience. As a probationary firefighter EMT, we had monthly tests. The tests were designed to make sure we were familiar with tools and appliances, pump and truck operations, box alarm running routes, and that we were familiar with our battalion and adjacent battalion firehouses. In total, we took 7 tests. On average, I scored low 90s. My wagon driver would always push me to do better. I wouldn't realize what and why he was doing what he was doing until many years later. Upon completion of my probationary period, I was detailed to Ambulance 30 for 6 months. A former class member and I were given our very own EMS unit for 24 hours. We were both top of our class, him being closer to 1 and me being closer to 5, yet we still complimented each other on the unit. We were 2 20-year-old young men trained to serve the citizens of Washington, D.C. On one of my off days, my partner was visiting the firehouse and called and told me I was being transferred to Engine 5. I took it as a joke, but he wasn't playing. I rushed to Engine 30 to see the transfer list, and it was so. The next tour of duty, I asked the chief why I was being transferred. He stated I was the lowest man in the company. The following tour of duty, I was involuntarily transferred to Engine 5. I was crushed. My new life in the 5th Battalion was very discouraging. I went from gaining much needed experience to maybe 10 calls a month. This was ideal for a person who was about to retire or had no interest in the job, but to me, it was devastating. I only had a year and a half on the job. I quickly put in transfer requests but was denied. At that point, I accepted I would be at Engine 5 and decided to make the best of it. At Engine 5, I had a lot of time on my hands. This is when I dedicated myself to studying department manuals. My former wagon master embedded in me to stay in the books. I knew I wouldn't be running calls and gaining much hands-on experience, but I always had to be ready. I requested drills and we would practice different scenarios in the firehouse. I also had to learn the 5th Battalion's area. Engine 5 was a slower E1 wagon. I found it easier to handle than Engine 8's 2003 Pierce. A plus about being at Engine 5, I was able to get more driving time. Instead of having to drive my personal vehicle to learn the district like I did at Engine 8, I was able to drive Engine 5 every shift because of the lower call volume. This is when I fell in love with driving the engine. Fall of 2006, I enrolled in school for television production. I took studio, field, lighting, and audio classes. I earned my certifications and focused mainly on producing music and promo videos for local artists. I would also fall in love with photography. One tour of duty while in the firehouse, my lieutenant showed me a few images he had taken. I was intrigued by the images and asked what kind of camera he was using. I looked into purchasing one, but $700 wasn't in my budget. I decided to get a point-and-shoot camera to test the waters. Photography became a way of escaping reality by capturing the beauties of life. Photography encouraged me to walk and see more land. A few months after purchasing my first point-and-shoot, the lens opened while in my running coat on a call. The lens was done for, so I decided to purchase my first DSLR. I was adapting to Engine 5. It was turning out to be a good fit. The members of Engine 5 loved the energy and the youth I brought to the firehouse. I didn't gain much firefighting or EMS experience, but I did learn many life lessons from the good people I was around. I was able to focus on school. I also gained a hobby in photography and found a way to escape the trauma of seeing death and gore. Photography became my way of escaping reality by capturing the beauties of life. Things were going well when one day I received a phone call. The 5th Battalion Chief asked me would I like to be transferred to Engine 7. I was given the option to volunteer or be involuntarily transferred. Nobody else wanted to go to Engine 7, so I accepted the transfer. In 2007, I was reassigned to Engine Company 7, Platoon 2. The pace of this firehouse was not too slow and not too fast. It was a great way for me to get back into the swing of things. I once again had to learn running routes and building layouts. What my wagon master had instilled in me was showing. I treated every new firehouse like a probationary period. I was getting paid to learn. My high school prayer had been answered. In June 2009, the wagon master at Engine 7 was set to retire. This meant a tech position was going to be available. This was a beautiful thing because I had been studying since day one. I was overconfident and studied light though. I would go on to fail the first test. To my luck, no one else passed the test. This opened the exam to the rest of the house. Later that evening, I received news that I was going to be a father. I now had competition and motivation. I learned from my past mistake and didn't take it lightly. As suspected, the competition and I were the only ones to pass the in-house exam. We were ready for the training school portion of the test, but just when things seemed sunny, a storm was headed this way. By May of 2010, I was experiencing fatherhood for the first time. My daughter was newly found motivation. I now had someone other than self to provide for. By January of 2010, I earned my television production certifications, completed my photography business plan, and I had focus and was plowing towards success. I was up for promotion as a wagon driver, scored average on the sergeant exam, and was on the road to completing all of my set goals. But you know that old saying, there's always a calm before the storm. I knew that when I passed the tech exam, I would have to take a urine test. The same stood with passing the sergeant exam. The department was also conducting random urine tests. I was playing with fire and was starting to feel the heat. I had to make a decision and make one fast. I had one opportunity to let the department know that I was having issues, so I decided to go for it. On May 28, 2010, I tested positive for use of marijuana. I was placed on administrative leave on June 3rd. Instead of honoring the contract I signed, I was denied the option to enroll into a drug program. My one opportunity was never granted. I sought advice from many members of the fire department and they all told me the same thing. I can't beat the charge. I should resign. Things seemed dim when a lieutenant I had previously worked with reached out to me. He explained that if I followed his instructions, I wouldn't lose and I would keep my job. I was instructed to treat my case like a job and work on it 8 to 10 hours a day. With his instructions and a determined attitude, Reading, writing, and research would become my life in the coming months leading to my trial board. The evening before my trial board, I was talking with my lawyer on strategy. We spoke about possible outcomes of the trial board. He asked me did I want to resign, and I said no. He went on to say if I were terminated, I would have a black mark on my name. I expressed to him, I'm a black man in America. I was born with a black mark on my name. I told him I'm not scared to fight a fire. Why would I be scared to fight a case? We ended the conversation and met up the following morning. We fought the case, and by God's grace, I wasn't terminated. Instead, the zero tolerance policy that had been put in place had been reversed. Now, instead of getting terminated, you were granted the opportunity to go into a rehab program. Everyone before me resigned, and everyone after me were allowed to go into a program. I was given an 1,176 hour suspension. I served the suspension from July 2011 until December 2011. For the first time in 9 years, I was without an income. What made matters worse, I seemed to find this trouble after having a child. I applied for many jobs during the process but couldn't find any work. When my 6 months of saving went dry, I was forced into homelessness. I was speaking with a friend about my situation and she heard my cries. She then made arrangements for me to stay at her mother's house. With this blessing, I had less to stress about. My plan was to complete my suspension and get back in good grace with the fire department. My main priority was securing housing and making sure my daughter's essential needs were taken care of. In July 2011, I was blessed with a lead photographer position at a studio in Washington, D.C. I was able to earn income and build my portfolio. I worked at the studio until my suspension was complete. I wanted to maintain employment at the photo studio, but when the fire department found that I was working, they made it harder for me to maintain both. After completing my suspension, I had to undergo a drug program and drug screen once a week. I completed the drug rehab program and was labeled a casual smoker. I would learn a plethora of lessons in substance abuse. I listened to stories from other participants and took a deeper understanding of addiction. I was able to leave the program with a better understanding of how traumatic life events could trigger substance abuse. In addition, I had to see a psychiatrist once a month outside of the fire department. Once I completed that process, I was scheduled to take a urine test and meet with another psychiatrist at the police and fire clinic. During my meetings with the police and fire clinic psychiatrist, I was diagnosed with adjustment disorder. These meetings would last a little over a year. After completing all re-entry requirements, I was detailed to the training academy for a refresher courses. I learned a lot about myself during this period and was able to use the knowledge when I returned to duty. On the ambulance, I was able to relate to patients and give my personal experiences as examples. Those who dealt with substance abuse were not alone. I looked for the good in bad situations and made the best of what was given. Little did I know I had opened a can of worms and lost the lid. When you don't feel welcome, you don't feel welcome. What do you do next? Add to the stress load or alleviate the stress by smoking chemical F? Wait, smoking weed isn't an option anymore. How am I going to swing this one? Nobody loves to go to work all the time, but there's a difference between routine workplace hassles and the work environment that stresses you out to the point of illness. When I'm right, I'm right, and when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I took my charges and did my suspension without playing the blame game. I accepted responsibility for my actions. I knew I would be under the microscope, and I accepted that because I chose to smoke weed. I've done the work of 2 or 3 people and received little or no appreciation. As the youngest member of Engine 7, I passed the tech exam, scored average on my first promotional exam, and took lead on EMS calls. I've built relationships with children from Engine 7's neighborhood and even had a non-official program in which I would fix kids' bikes when I worked on the weekends. I was using my blessing to inspire others. I kept a positive attitude and told myself, act like a probationer and I would eventually be left alone. But knowing my job and doing my job wasn't enough. Dealing with constant gossip, office politics, and use of spies would eventually leave me feeling angered and overwhelmed. I was reporting for duty every tour to a toxic work environment which seemed to have no end. I became hopeless. In November 2013, after receiving multiple charges from the same chief, I asked him did he have a problem with me. He replied, well, Justin, some people only respond when you take their money away. You should be lucky you have a job. If it were up to me, you wouldn't have a job. I expressed to him that I never caused trouble in the firehouse. I've never had an accident or missed a call. I never received a complaint from civilians or fire department members. I also expressed that I did in fact want to be a firefighter and his actions were prohibiting me to function at my full capacity. This happened upon receiving disciplinary papers for an up-and-coming trial board. I had confirmation that the battalion fire chief didn't have me in his best interest. I was angered by his actions but made it through my 24-hour shift on the ambulance. Soon after our conversation, I would wake up in a depressed state. This was my tipping point. I couldn't go into a new year with this madness on my mind. I became anxious and couldn't endure impending doom. On January 1st, 2014, as I lay in the bed, shivering in an unfinished basement, I shed tears and asked the Lord for forgiveness for what I was about to do. At 0600 hours, I called and informed the officer to place me on AWOL. What was is, but what's a man to do when his back's against the wall? Will there ever be an end to this madness? When life hands you life, live. I found myself in deep water. I spoke with friends and coworkers who all felt I should file a grievance and/or complaint. At this point, I became disengaged and anxious at work. I was having a bad feeling about things and saw no light at the end of the tunnel. I was isolated and detailed to Ambulance 3 more than average. I felt the negative energy when I walked into certain firehouses. The offensive comments and jokes about my bad boy time created a hostile environment. It was a challenge for me to keep focused. I've been called incompetent and made to look as a liability. These series of incidents has not only left me mentally, but also economically injured. My reputation has been damaged as well. I have been tormented to the point where I lost all hope in being a firefighter. The spreading of malicious gossip and rumors made the work environment uncomfortable. On January 1st, 2014, I woke up feeling sick to my stomach and crying. I had an ill feeling about going to work. I know if I requested EAL, my battalion fire chief would deny it. I know if I went to the PFC on sick call, I would risk being put on extended sick leave and forced back into duty. I weighed my options and decided it was best to call off work. I called at a respectable time and informed the officer that I would not be reporting for duty. He asked me to take off sick leave or EAL, but I told him, like I know, the chief is going to grant me leave. The officer expressed that I had to play the game. I told him it's not a game, it's about my sanity and my livelihood. He recommended the Employee Assistance Program. I expressed that the EAP couldn't make the fire department give me a decision or get the chief to stop attacking me. The anxious feeling was still with me the following tour, so I called off again. I was ordered by Battalion Fire Chief not to report back to duty until I completed a fitness for duty examination at the Police and Fire Clinic. I was instructed to contact the Police and Fire Clinic for further instruction. I spoke with the chief and he stated he never heard of a chief requesting a fitness for duty exam. He then said he would get back with me. I immediately called Engine 7 and spoke with the officer in charge. I informed him that I spoke with the chief at the Police and Fire Clinic. I instructed the officer to make a journal entry stating I spoke with the chief and he said he would get back with me about a fitness for duty examination. The weekend ended and I had not heard back from the chief. I spoke with him on Wednesday of that prior week, so on Tuesday morning I decided to contact the chief again. I was told again he had to get more information and he would get back with me. I contacted Engine 7 and spoke with the officer, instructing him to make a second journal entry stating the chief would get back with me. After the second tour of AWOL, special reports were sent to the chain of command. I never received a phone call from the Police and Fire Clinic, so I made no further contact with the fire department. By the 10th tour of AWOL, I was officially charged with abandonment of duty. On February 14, 2014, I received a phone call from the officer of the fire chief and the fire chief himself. He asked me why I had been AWOL. I told him I was going through a lot and I didn't want to bring it to work. I expressed I made the wrong decisions in the past and they were coming back to haunt me. We set up a meeting, we were able to meet in person. Upon reviewing my file, he immediately saw a pattern and said, "Oh, they messing with you." I was shocked before I could say anything. He knew what was happening. He asked me what would I like to happen. I asked what could happen. He looked at me and said, "I can't make this disappear. It'll be all over the news." The best he could offer me was a last chance agreement. A last chance agreement meant that if I wouldn't get in trouble for 3 years, I wouldn't have to deal with the AWOL charges or other pending charges. I said, "You see what's happening, and if I fart or sneeze wrong, I'm gonna be put on charges." I decided against the last chance agreement and asked the chief could he get my decision for my other trial board cases. I wanted to get what was coming to me over with. From that point on, I knew I had to activate my exit strategy. At the conclusion of my suspension, I called and spoke with the chief about my duty status. I wanted to know his instructions for my next tour of duty. He laughed and said, "You're not just gonna walk back in here and get a check." I told him it's not about a check, it's about your instructions. I asked him again, "What are your orders for the day?" He told me I was not to report to duty until I had a fitness for duty exam. I then informed him that the chief at the Police and Fire Clinic said he never heard of a chief requesting a fitness for duty exam. I then asked him, "What is my status going to be for the day?" He replied, "AWOL." I asked him, how can I be charged with AWOL when I'm ready to report for duty? I then said, okay, I'll take the AWOL charge, and we ended the conversation. 2 hours later, I received a phone call from Engine 7 officers stating that I had been placed on administrative leave. I remained on administrative leave for 2 tours and received my second suspension of the year. I received a 180-hour suspension from my February 2013 trial board. I served that suspension from April until May 4th of 2014. On May 1st, 2014, the tour before the completion of my suspension, I contacted the battalion fire chief and asked him what was his instruction for my next tour of duty. I was instructed once again to schedule a fitness for duty examination. On the morning of May 4th, 2014, I received a phone call from Engine 7's officer. He informed me I was scheduled to work at 1,900 hours per telestaff. I immediately called the battalion fire chief and asked him what his orders were. He looked on telestaff and saw that I was scheduled to work and told me he would call me back. Minutes later, he called back and said the deputy fire chief overthrew his orders for a PFC evaluation. I informed the chief I was unprepared for duty and would not be able to make it to work at 1,900 hours because of the last-minute notification. He said I must come to work tonight or I'll be placed on AWOL. I expressed to the chief, I know you're trying to hurt me. I just did a 240 and 180-hour suspension and you would see me do more? I then told him I would see him at the trial board. I called and informed the officer to make a journal entry stating I was denied EAL and I would not be reporting to duty tonight. I assumed duty the following tour. I stayed in full duty status until June 6 when I was placed on administrative leave for being arrested. The matter was resolved and I went back to full duty July 4th. I was at work until July 24th when I received notification from my September 11th, 2012 trial board. The final decision was a 436-hour suspension. I also received notification of yet another trial board. I was charged with AWOL on May 4th, 2014 at 1,900 hours and a conviction of a felony. I was never charged with a felony, but charges were exaggerated. This was usual with this chief. The day I signed for my suspension and notification of charges, I asked the chief did he think a 436-hour suspension was fair. He said no. I also learned he was being transferred to Battalion 5. On June 26, 2014, my abandonment of post-trial board was held. I pled not guilty and gave my reasoning. I expressed that I felt sick to my stomach on the morning of January 1st, 2014. I provided evidence that after my second tour of duty, my chief ordered me for a fitness to duty examination. I presented email evidence that I was ordered to the police and fire clinic by my chief. While on the witness stand, the battalion fire chief lied on the record saying he did not order firefighter Justin Scales to the police and fire clinic for a fitness to duty examination. When evidence was presented that he did order firefighter Scales to the PFC, he admitted he indeed ordered firefighter Scales to the PFC. Engine 7's officer testified that the battalion fire chief ordered firefighter Scales to the PFC. The officer also testified that firefighter Scales should have been placed on administrative leave. Both the battalion fire chief and Engine 7 officer testified that firefighter Scales has never had a work performance issue. They both testified that Scales got along well with others. They also testified that firefighter Scales was a good worker when he came to work. The officer also testified that in the 2 years that I've been back, he's only worked with me about 10 times. The exact opposite of the history of what his special reports read. The battalion fire chief at the police and fire clinic denied that he spoke with firefighter Scales on any occasion. This is with phone records and journal entries provided. Engine 7's officer testified that firefighter Scales placed himself on AWOL and that the battalion fire chief would deny EAL requests. He also testified that he didn't feel safe going to the police and fire clinic in fear of retaliation. On the morning of October 12, 2014, at the conclusion of my 436-hour suspension, I learned that I was terminated. After providing evidence that I had not intentionally abandoned my post, the trial board panel decided against me. This decision came after the battalion fire chief lied on record. The trial board panel found enough reason to end my 12 years of service. Although I had lost the battle, all hope wasn't lost. I gathered copies of medical records, emails, phone records, and other papers to assist with my appeal. I had a to-do list given by the fire department. I was to return my gear, EMT and CPR cards, get signatures from human resources and other departments. I had 30 calendar days to appeal the decision. I filed an appeal a day late because I believed that the notice read 30 business days. I then learned I had to appeal that decision. I appealed the decision, but the motion was denied. I had let certain victories slip through my fingers. The people who knew the rules knew that union officials did a great job at creating a fair system by putting up guardrails. I never anticipated we would have chiefs that would just throw away those guardrails. I am disappointed in the final decision. I understood that there were crooked dealings being played, and as the years flew by, I realized I had unfinished business to attend to. I have a story to tell, and it will be heard for generations to come. They will want to know what I did. The truth deserves light. Years after my exit from the fire department, I'm still haunted by the actions of ranking members. Reminiscing on my experiences as a DC firefighter, I believe wholeheartedly that if a supervisor doesn't like you, he or she will inflict financial injury upon you purposely. With that in mind, I made a vow to never give anyone power over my financial situation. I made up in my mind to be my own boss. I found the courage to leave the nest and fly abroad in search of my own meal. This way, if I fail, it was all on me and not because of the poor decisions of man. Live free or die, because one day, my fate will be sealed anyway. People have made assumptions on how and why I was terminated without pertinent details. As I assess the situation, all I can come up with is I got weak and didn't fully protect myself. I should have written a special report about the chief lying at the trial board. I should have filed an EEO complaint. I should have not had faith that the trial board members would see the truth and acknowledge what was going on. I was naive in thinking that the right decision will be rendered. I now realize it is imperative to protect yourself at all times from every angle. What I do have from this experience is a paper trail left by ranking members of the fire department. This would show a pattern of abuse of power. It's now up to me to provide the facts of what I endured leading up to my termination. There is no reason I still shouldn't be rising through the ranks. The truth will be heard. The time for redemption has arrived. I'm maintaining, keeping my head above water, but treading in these waters will leave you in shape like no other. They say I was digging a ditch with my actions, but what they didn't know that that ditch was actually a foundation. What can I do but stay true?
Yo, I'm from Stacktown. We taking investors who want stocks. I wanted to see the world, so I got on the block. Yo, I'm from Stacktown. We taking investors who want stocks. I wanted to see the world, so I got on the block.